Did you know Higher Ed's premier tech conference, Ellucian Live, is almost here? Join industry leaders in New Orleans, March 26th through 29th. Discover insights and game-changing solutions to unlock possibility and drive student success. Register at elive.ellucian.com.
Epic.
3 higher ed authors, 100 plus college and university presidents, dozens of actionable insights for academic leaders. Commencement, the beginning of a new era in higher education, is now available on Amazon. Everybody, it's your time to EdUp on the EdUp Experience podcast, where we make education your business. This is Dr. Joe Salcito back with you on another episode, and I'm actually recording this one in the morning with my guest because I canceled on him like 2 times, and then I was like, hey, can you do it in the morning? He said yes. And what I've already noticed, if you haven't, is that I talk a lot slower in the morning because I've yet to have my second or third cup of coffee. So it's probably clearer and better for you as a listener, but unfortunately this doesn't happen very often, although it does feel nice to do this in the morning, I have to say. You know, I'm going to thank you for those of you that have picked up Commencement, the beginning of a new era in higher education, the book that we just put out, me and my co-author, Kate Colbert, with our contributor, Elvin Freites, where we took the first 125 presidents we interviewed on this podcast and put all their insights in a book so you could catch up on what's going on for the future of higher education. And it is all about the future, isn't it? And if you actually look at what has taken place in the last 6 months, and we're recording this in February. So you look at, go from November, not even 6 months, the last 4 or 5 months. And boy, hasn't technology just advanced rapidly, or at least our general awareness of technology, AI, and all of these things. It's existed and it's been in the background, but for some reason, ChatGPT, for example, has caught on like fire. But we like to bring on people who are in the middle of what the future of education may look like or is looking like. And I've got one of those folks here with me today. I'm going to bring him in right now. Here he is, ladies and gentlemen. He is Anthony Salcito. He is Chief Institution Business Officer at Nerdy. Anthony, what's going on?
Dr. Joe, it's great to be here on EdUp. I love to hear you slow down a bit, but I know that's going to change once we get going.
Yeah. It's the New York in me, I think. When I get going,
Too.
I just start talking fast.
I'm a kid from the Bronx at heart, so that's where I get it.
Yeah, and you know what? When I've worked with people in the Midwest or in the West Coast, and I start talking, they're like, "You talk so fast." I'm like, "Really? It doesn't feel that fast," but to other people, it is. And you're going to have to talk fast today because you have a lot to say, and you're doing some really incredible work, Anthony. It's really impressive. But level set for the audience: what is Nerdy? What is it? How does it work? What do you guys do? How do you do it?
Yeah, so absolutely. We are trying to lead a movement towards individualized instruction. So we provide access to resources, education support, and certainly tutors via one of our organizations, Varsity Tutors, to schools, universities, people looking to catch up, master some subjects, etc. So we manage the country's largest network of tutors. We actually have support for coding and learning to code with a company called Codeverse. So there's a number of things dedicated all to helping kids and adults actually build skills to prepare them for the world that we live in.
So Varsity Tutors, huge company, very innovative. What you're doing at Nerdy is amazing. And part of what the message has been is we're really changing the nature of education, or maybe it's the consumer that's changing how they want to consume education, learning, and so on. And you do it in a personalized way. What does that mean exactly, a personalized way? Because that is really, and the reason I asked that question in particular is because we talk about that here on the podcast all the time. Like we shifted from MOOCs. That was the big thing. Like, sure, we're going to have these massive open online courses and anybody can go and it doesn't matter who you are. And it's kind of come full circle now to, we need to make education more personalized for every learner. So can you talk about personalization a little bit as a foundational?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, well, if you look at education, it started personal. It started with a parent, an adult or a learner in working with a master as an apprentice. Once we moved into formalized education, we sort of recognized one of the key concerns was faculty, teachers were having to teach to the middle, and there were some kids who were not at the same pace at the curriculum, who were struggling to catch up, and that created a situation where they were just preparing for testing and losing and not mastering concepts, and kids that were bored ahead. And that's a reality that has plagued educators for as long as formalized education has existed. What's happened throughout hundreds of years is people who had means were able to get specialized education support, tutors, other resources to support their own learning journey specifically. Kids that were motivated could seek out digital resources. Parents that were motivated to get their students ahead, get them prepared for SAT, ACT testing, et cetera, were able to identify tutors. But it hasn't been built into the delivery mechanism of standardized, formalized education. But what's happening now, because of the expansion, the availability, the equity of digital resources, as well as human resources enabled by digital platforms, the capacity to deliver individualized education is starting to come really not only possible, but easy to deliver and afford. And that's something that I think is really yet to take hold. A lot of folks think about tutoring as remediation for kids who are performing badly, but we haven't really understood the ability to actually create individualized coaches to support individualized student needs, as well as provide just support for the educators who want to differentiate instruction. And that's something that I think we're just at the very early precipice of. Tutoring has existed for hundreds of years, but systems, education institutions thinking about creating individualized instruction capacity is something that I think has yet really to take hold. And that's something that I think will become part of the future delivery considerations for universities, schools, and certainly educators.
That's a fact. That's a fact.
I love that one, by the way. I have to ask, because you brought it up, about the perception of tutoring, right? Perhaps even just a generation ago, or my generation, if you were looking for a tutor, it's because you were not doing well and you needed to catch up, or you had some kind of learning gap, or you were less than, and that's just not the case anymore, right? And is that because tutoring is so much more readily available and you can do it online, and that makes it, I don't know, somehow better than the tutor that you had to get down the street where everybody had to watch you, or you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, I
there's
think
a stigma.
there's certainly a stigma to it, and I think that still exists, unfortunately. But all of us need help. The best at anything takes time to listen to coaches, to get feedback, and it's great. One of the things that students who are working with tutors love is having a sort of a non-biased third-party bouncing board for feedback, for support. Lots of kids nod their head yes when an educator is asking them if they got a concept. I just wrote this advanced calculus formula on the board. Is everyone clear what I've just done? And everyone says yes. And they say yes primarily to avoid stigma from their peers, to ensure that the professor or the teacher feels like they've got it and are a good student and working at pace with the rest of their peers. But they don't have it, and they get more and more anxious with every passing course. What happens when a student has a tutor is they unload and say, hey, I'm struggling with this, and this. And the tutor is able to kind of work backwards to ensure that they've gotten maybe past concepts that are building blocks and reasons why they're stumbling on the current concept. Now, that's not possible in the class. The educator can't unwind to where the student struggles, but sometimes those are launching pads for struggle that had not been identified. But tutors are able to unwind and say, hey, let's reassure that you've got this concept that really ladders up to what we're learning today. And that level of focus, that level of trust, and frankly, that level of unleash that students have with a tutor is really unique. And it's something that we can embrace across the entire population of students. And I believe that what we're seeing is students are more and more excited about that and don't necessarily feel the stigma, We still see the stigma sometimes from educators who feel like the introduction of a tutor is somehow an indication that they failed, that they haven't done their job. And we've got to both solve the problem on the student level from a perception standpoint, but also to recognize to educators that this is in no way a reflection of your failure, but it actually is something that is designed to help you expand the impact that you have every day with kids, because it's impossible for an educator or professor to support the individualized learning needs of a class of 50, 100, 600 kids in a university campus.
Nailed it.
One thing you said, it made my brain just go fire is, if you actually look at COVID and, we've belabored the point of COVID and its effect on education, but learning loss happened at all levels. It didn't matter your age. It didn't matter your situation. Your learning loss happened. And that learning loss was just even beyond the classroom. It was social skills. It was being able to be with one another, emotional, mental, so on. There was just this loss of connection. And did that, I guess the question is, did that, the result of COVID, make tutoring more acceptable or readily available as a solution to helping solve some of the learning loss?
Well, the answer is absolutely, but we still have a way to go there, and I'll get back to that. But I would first say learning loss was absolutely not invented, unfortunately, during COVID.
Right.
It existed before, but what happened when we forced digital as the only resource, a couple of things changed. One, we had a lot more desire to see what was going on because we couldn't see it with our eyes. Educators couldn't see it with our eyes. Leaders couldn't walk halls and see what was happening. So they relied on data in a way that wasn't authentic and genuine throughout the quest for data-driven decision-making in institutions and universities. Data became the value for institutions, and that changed perception of let's inspect, let's look at what's going on. And that's when learning loss really started to become not necessarily more real, but maybe more transparent, more
visible,
focused from an institution leadership perspective. The other thing that happened was a shift to digital opened up an understanding of technology's real use as a vehicle to expand the boundaries of connection and communication, the boundaries of the university and classrooms and schools. And that created an openness to digital and virtual learning options. And so both of those two things, I think, created, hey, we've got to respond to the learning loss data, what it's showing us, and we don't have any other options. So let's bring in tutors because we need more support. We need an answer for parents, et cetera. And then the other was obviously availability of federal funding that made these types of decisions very easy for institution leaders. What we still haven't solved, though, unfortunately, is a recognition and understanding that tutoring is not just something temporary to address learning loss, but it actually is something that is a new component to help transform individualized instruction for institutions. And that's something that I think they're starting to get. And I don't think there's any putting the toothpaste back in the tube. Once parents and students who have experienced the value of these types of individualized instruction models, once they have that, it's impossible for it to go away and go back to the old way of learning where students were struggling and falling behind and they had no answers. And that's something that I think institutions have yet to realize. But once we start moving away from federal funding, there will be a reckoning of saying, how do we figure out how to build the right models for individualized instruction going forward?
That's a tough challenge for us, and something that is, I know for us as higher education administrators, something that is discussed all the time, how we individualize, personalize higher education. But I do want to take one quick step back to something you said earlier, and you gave that scenario of the classroom and the professor or instructor says, how many of you understand the concept? And everybody raises their hand. And then you literally painted the picture for me because I put myself in that situation. And I'm like, I remembered the times that I would walk away from a class going to my buddy, I have no stinking clue what they just said. And now I'm going to go home and I'm going to try to figure it out. I'm going to ask my friends. And now you fast forward to tutoring aside, we all get tutoring. It comes in the form of scouring the internet, going to YouTube. I mean, I had the pilot light on my furnace because it blew out. I had no, I was like, okay, this is an old furnace. Where the heck is it? It's like YouTube it. I learned how to light where the pilot light was on this particular unit of furnace because it looked a little bit more complicated than what I had seen in the past. Did I learn? Yes. So the point is that we seek out informal tutoring in so many ways. Why not formalize it? And, you know, and I'm kind of soapboxing, but you take this into higher education and you think about retention. So that student that says, I have no idea what my professor just said, whether it's online or on ground, the retention becomes an issue. The belonging piece of higher education and DEI and staying somewhere because you feel you belong comes into question. And the self-efficacy and self-confidence. And then you have a student who quits, or you have a student that stops showing up because they feel like they're getting behind. So we can't let that happen.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's completely right. We leverage digital resources all along to get insight and find out things that we learn. But the individual who helps and supports and can see progress and could diagnose problems potentially is something that you really can't get online. The other reality is, and I would say the two most important words when institutions think about tutoring are consistent and scheduled. It turns out that scheduled tutoring is a difference maker. We can have live people at the ready for students to reach out to, but the consistent person on the other end that can see progress and build a relationship and trust with the learner, as well as a schedule where I know at 4 p.m. on Thursday, I have calculus homework, or I'm working through Visual Basic or C++ coaching with a tutor, or learning literacy in 3rd grade at a certain time a day, a certain week, every week cadence. That helps not only build consistency and understanding, but it also builds sort of an expectation that this is part of my resource. It's part of my schedule. It's part of my academic routine that I think helps learners and students. So that's something that I think we've got to do. And that's something that I think is augmented by all the digital resources that are there. And one of the things that we do at Varsity Tutors is there's so many enrichment resources and classes and things like that, that our tutors will often recommend, for students to work on until their next session. So, hey, take advantage of this class or this digital resource, et cetera. So the two of them can very much complement each other, where we have digital reservoirs of resources that individuals can point students to. Just like a guitar lesson, and that's probably the only tutoring I ever had in my life, was a guitar tutor.
I had a trombone tutor, if you could believe it.
Oh wow, we could start a little band. A
I don't
terrible
think it's going to
band,
be very good.
Whatever. But giving those exercises, the only thing I cared about was making sure I didn't look bad the next time. So I had to practice those primarily because the schedule was there looming, and I needed to do it. The same sort of thing happens with tutors. Students want to make sure that they've worked on the things that the tutor has requested and driven. So that schedule and consistency really makes a huge difference.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I have your attention? It's time for us to solve the puzzle of success in higher education. Get your ticket to Ellucian Live for industry insights, powerful connections, and innovative solutions. From March 26th through 29th, join peers from around the world in New Orleans to unlock the possibility and drive student and institutional success. Learn more and register at elive.ellucian.com. You know that the world of higher education is experiencing evolutions and revolutions. You want to be part of the progress. Commencement, the beginning of a new era in higher education with insights from more than 100 college and university presidents, will show you how. Get your copy of Commencement, the beginning of a new era in higher education now on Amazon right away. We think you're going to love it. It's amazing. Do you, how do you match? If I need a tutor, am I just getting any old person here, or, how does it work? Can you talk about the algorithm, or
Sure.
how it works to match me with a tutor that's going to make me most successful?
Yeah, this is certainly where AI comes into play. One of the things we often do is do a preliminary assessment of students. So students will take, with whatever subject we're looking for, whatever grade level they're at, we run sort of a diagnostics assessment of where they are sometimes it helps us certainly identify where we need to focus the tutoring and instruction. Maybe if there's some hidden issues that we need to reinforce or go over through the tutoring, we certainly do that. And then we take that information and run it through our database of tutors. And we have identified tutors based on experience of working with these tutors, their academic credentials, ratings that students have given tutors in certain areas to match the right tutor for the right student. And that sometimes, it normally works the first time where a student is matched with a great tutor and they've got a great relationship, but we get feedback on every single session. So students will tell us, just like when you get in an Uber, you can give a star rating. Students will tell us how their session went. Did they learn anything of value? Are they excited about the next session? And when they're telling us they're not, we look to place that student with a different tutor. So it's an ongoing evolution process with the relationships, but AI helps us a great deal match the tutor with student.
Speaking of
artificial intelligence,
what is this whole movement of chat GPT and predictive, writing algorithms going to do to students in general? Do you guys like do an external scan at Nerdy and say, oh, look at these new technologies? We need we're like, 6 months away from having an explosion of tutors being needed across the world because nobody's going to try to write anymore. I mean, is that,
sure.
How do you guys scan the landscape?
It's a great question. And certainly we're this is something that I have a lot of engagement with now, partly because of my history with Microsoft, and Microsoft's been very much in the forefront of the ChatGPT work.
By the way, to the audience, this gentleman right here was the VP of Worldwide Education at Microsoft.
I like your style, dude.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I spent more than a day at Microsoft working on very much similar things that I'm doing now to help really individualize and personalize learning. And that way, it was all through technology. In many ways, what I do now is actually doing the exact same thing with humans. And it's a very much of an interesting conversation around AI, because AI is really where those two things coalesce.
Mm-hmm.
And there's obviously a lots of fear about AI replacing jobs and functions, et cetera. And some of that is real and some of that is exaggerated. And AI is going to create many more careers and professions and jobs. And it may displace some roles, but it's going to create more in other capacities that we can't even imagine yet. And just certainly, if you look at careers that exist today that are enabled by technology, no one could have consumed things like a YouTuber or a podcaster being professions 20 years ago. Yeah. The same dynamic will happen. But as it relates to the work we're thinking about tutoring's role, AI's role in tutoring, it's hugely valuable in terms of getting answers to questions. Certainly, ChatGPT is certainly, we recognize it can do a good job there. We know it's going to be used for things like customer service, to take information, to personalize information for customers, for responsiveness and better reporting and things like that. But we still value that human connection. And that's often not because of the quality of the AI answers. It's the value that the human connection has in motivation, understanding social and emotional connections to learners. That I think are certainly important. But all of us are going to be, I would like to say augmented by that artificial intelligence versus really just replaced. And that's something that I think is going to be true in tutoring as well. But we're very much invested in exploring ChatGPT and other AI to make the work that we do more efficient, more cost-effective for institutions and learners, but also something that we can potentially enhance the services that we provide.
Epic.
Do you find that those being tutored, so those that are seeking out a tutor, once you match them and they become invested in their tutor and the tutor becomes invested in them, that I don't know, does it become a sustainable relationship over time? How that human connection feels like that is the most important part of it all, right? Because I can get a tutor once, and if I don't like them, then I'm gonna I don't know, think about somebody else, or maybe not get a tutor this time, and so on and so on. So that match has to be really thought out, right? Because you want to really kind of, I use the word hook, but in a good sense, you want to make sure that the tutor is really able to hook the person being tutored and the person who's being tutored really to hook onto the tutor, because that relationship, that personal connection becomes the foundation of successful work.
Yeah, I think it certainly helps when there is a great connection and relationship between learners and students, but it's not required. In many cases, the student having knowledge that they have some backup is really the key. It helps with their confidence, etc. I just learned a tough lesson in class. I don't get it fully. Don't worry. I have someone I can talk to tomorrow that's going to help me reinforce this. And if that person's a different person today than it was yesterday, that's not a problem. The tutor I work with was sick or something, whatever. I still have that backup. But when you have a great relationship and the tutor, more importantly, can see progress and motivate a student because of that personal connection that they've had, then it becomes really magical. And certainly we've had parents who have begged us to keep tutors in place for a long time. My student has worked with this tutor. Please don't do anything you can to not lose that tutor relationship. And certainly when we see that connection, it's certainly special.
How many tutors are we talking about here? Can you give us some idea of scale? How many learners? How many tutors? Or if that's a hard number because you can't nail it down, how many service requests are you filling? Can you give us some type of idea on the scale of the business and how you guys are growing?
Yeah, so we have, at a rough number is around 40,000 tutors in our network, and these are some tutors who tutor 1 hour a week. Some that tutor 8 hours a week, some tutors 50 hours a week. So it really ranges across the commitment of the tutors in the network. Some are very active, some are not active at all.
Amazing.
And certainly we support 3,000 subjects. So if you want advanced calculus, if you want to learn second grade math, you have a tutor for you from that pool. And what happens because of that, we're spending a lot of time recruiting and finding tutors for things that are needed. So one of the examples, we work with school districts who have language needs. They may need Russian or Vietnamese, as an example that we just recently dealt with one school district, and we recruit actively every single month, and we tune that recruiting to the needs, whether either it's subject, language, for the students that we're serving.
Are there obscure things? I mean, Vietnamese seems, as a language, it's, but if you think about our country, it is very diverse. And that if you're just looking at U.S. school districts alone, I mean, you could be in the Southwest and, have a huge Spanish population and need to have different needs, different tutoring, subjects. Is there obscurity in what you're providing sometimes? You're like, oh man, how are we going to find a tutor in this?
Well, yeah, certainly the curriculum is fairly standard. So, the vast majority of tutoring requests tend to be for the math and sciences and literacy. So in elementary schools, literacy becomes a huge priority, and that really sometimes even in middle and high school, but math and sciences, computer science, and certainly math becomes the focus. Where sometimes the special needs students that we support have unique considerations and things like that. And certainly there's examples across the edge that we have to support either with languages that are not very, very popular here in the US, or a specific subject. But for the most part, just learning algebra becomes the big problem for lots of schools.
It's hard. Math is it, right? Like if most of the people I know, who, myself in particular, that's who I'm talking about, but I say most people, and I'm actually talking about myself, struggled with math, and algebra is where I lost it. And I floundered in math for years, never had a tutor, never had any help. It didn't catch up. Actually, I don't think I ever caught up until I stopped having to go take class in math, and then finally figured it out through business and went backwards and relearned and so on. But I mean, if I had to do it all over again, I go, man, I wish my parents had gotten me a tutor when I really needed it, because that would have saved me years of, trying to fly under the radar almost. And it does create this, I hope nobody finds out kind of attitude. So I really hope that tutoring people look at tutoring in such a helpful, supportive way, because it just makes a huge, huge difference, not only to the learner, but your confidence and confidence around you, your whole ecosystem of I don't know, possibilities, right? So I just really like the work that you guys are doing. What is it like for you? Where is going? Is this scale? Is it global scale? Is it what's the world domination goal?
Well, I'm just trying to help every learner. There's no sort of stopping of the needs for tutoring and individualized instruction. I think the thing that I'm excited about, and I've always in my career recognized the value of educators and the need to support educators in the work that they do. And I'm excited about having educators feel empowered by this capacity.
Oh, yeah.
Right now, educators have, and I talk to educators every day that are surprised by these resources and are sort of excited about what potential they have. Educators have known tutoring has existed, but it's not often existed for the right kids that they need it for, because those kids may have not had parents who had the means or awareness of tutoring to provide it for their children. And the teachers were left out of that environment. So we've just launched something called teacher assigned tutoring, where we put that kind of trusted and connection and consistent relationship that we try to strive for with a tutor and a student, with a tutor and a teacher. So a teacher is assigned a group of tutors that they can deploy for their students in their classroom. Wow. When they see an issue, wow is right. Let's say I've just done a tough lesson and I can sense that maybe 5 or 6 kids didn't get it. I can immediately click a button, upload that lesson, assign my tutors to the kids, and then get direct feedback from the tutors on the progress. So the teacher is now in control and at the center of this engagement. And a number of things happen in really cool ways. One is you get just-in-time recognition of learners struggling, and you get them the support right there. Most of tutoring exists when kids have definitely evidenced failure. They've either fallen behind academically, they got a low score in SAT, et cetera, and then people react.
Nailed it.
By bringing tutors to teachers, teachers can identify that learning gap immediately and solve a bigger problem from happening. So we love that. We also love the idea of giving teachers the support that they desperately need. I now have resources. We talk to teachers who basically tell us every single day they have to make a decision. Do I leave school now to go home to my own children, and leave a couple of kids that I know need help to struggle and fall behind? Or do I sacrifice time from my own children to stay after school with a couple of students that are struggling? And teachers do that every single day.
Definition of a double-edged sword, isn't it?
Exactly. It's a daily thing that teachers do. And one of the reasons why teachers leave the profession, and I work very closely with teach.org, which recruits and drives insight and research on the profession, is because of that struggle. They get fatigued by not the daily grind of educating, but these types of decisions that they have to make and sacrifices they make across their lives. Now, a teacher can go home confidently knowing that they've got the resource for those students to follow up on and support them. And that's amazing. And that's just where we are today. Eventually, what we're going to start to see is pedagogy start to shift with the knowledge that individualized instruction is part of the equation. So the educator can take different chances, can do different things because they have that kind of resource in place. So I do think the evolution here of teachers being at the center will be certainly interesting. I'm excited about that. We have just launched this in December, so we are really early in this model. There's really not other tutoring models and modalities that look like this. And certainly I'm going back to my roots, which knowing that the power of impact in classrooms come from educators, and putting more power and control in educators is often something that the systems don't do first. And I saw this directly with technology. Leaders thrusted technology into schools and classrooms on teachers and on faculty. In many cases, faculty and educators weren't prepared. They didn't understand the usage scenarios. They weren't bought in. It wasn't for them. It was for checking boxes. It was to cover gaps, whatever it was. But the motivation was not to really think about the direct needs of a faculty member or a teacher and buy technology and use technology for that. it was coming from other motivations. The same thing I think has been true for tutoring. Leaders have said, hey, we've got learning loss, we've got some bad optics, we've got some angry parents, let's hire some tutoring companies, with very little realization of the impact or the equation solving for teachers. And so I don't want to make that same mistake. So when I came to Varsity, the first thing I said was, where are the teachers in any of this? And the answer I saw from our company and many other tutoring companies was tutors were being impacted only because the students that they were in their classroom were getting support, but it wasn't for or through or with them. And our teacher assigned tutoring option that we offer as one of the many options we provide to schools is something that I'm excited about, because I do think it's for and through teachers.
Fantastic.
I love that. Right. Anybody that's, I got 2 kids, and I hear stuff all the time about teachers and their struggles, and there just aren't enough. I mean, my kid's school just recently, it was like they couldn't find a 4th grade teacher. Like, they're just looking in the community for anybody that could teach 4th grade, and it's like, what is going on? So anybody that's supporting teachers, that are supporting our kids, it's critical work, Anthony, and I thank you for what you're doing. I do want you to close us out with, what do you see for the future of education or higher education? Any trends we should watch out for? What's coming?
Well, I certainly think the rise of the technology options of individualized learning is going to continue. I think the notion of students preparing in a much more direct way for careers is starting to become real. And every school I visit, the career prep and career readiness is becoming far more specialized. Kids are not learning for a field, they're learning for specific jobs today. And that's, again, an example and evidence of individualized instruction. You can't teach a group of 60 kids for individualized careers and jobs. That's enabled by technology and other things, but individualization is needed, and it actually mirrors the workplace, which has become far more diversified and specialized. And that's something that I think is becoming definitely part of the education landscape. It's certainly happening in higher education. It's happening from an employer perspective, who demands students who become sort of job ready for careers and fields. And I think that's going to be something that will trickle down across education as we go forward.
Well done, my friend. I really appreciate your insight, and particularly around what you're doing for students and teachers. I would love to bring you back once you launch the teacher tutoring option, and you can scale it, and you're able to bring back some results and tell us how it's going. I'd love to have you back to talk about that, because I think that is such a amazing, innovative model, and I'd love to hear more about it. And I think our audience would too, because that's that type of innovation. It's like, it makes total sense. How come we haven't helped support the teachers in this way before? And think about the outcomes for schools, and everything is tied to funding. And if we can increase the outcomes, increase the funding. If for higher education, there's just so many implications for that to be successful, and we'll help it any way we can here at EdUp.
That's awesome, Joe. I look forward to it. And thank you for the work that you're doing, and I can't wait to talk again.
Ladies and gentlemen, here he is. He is Anthony Salcito. He's Chief Institution Business Officer at Nerdy. Anthony, did you have a good experience here on the podcast today?
It was amazing, and I appreciate your time. Always good to talk, and thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, you've just EdUp'd. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for some
amazing
news. It's time to work together to solve the puzzle of success in higher education. Ellucian Live returns to New Orleans from March 26th through 29th to help you unlock possibility for your institution. And yes, the EdUp experience will be there recording live. Industry leaders from all across the world are converging to discover new insights, game-changing solutions, and powerful connections, all with the goal of addressing higher ed's greatest opportunities and biggest challenges. You do not want to miss Ellucian Live. Learn more and secure your seat today at elive.ellucian.com. It will be
amazing.
It's time to
Level up.
The beginning of a new era in higher education begins with you. Order your copy of Commencement, The Beginning of a New Era in Higher Education by Kate Colbert, Dr. Joe Salustio, with contributions by Elvin Freitas. It's higher education's must-read book of 2022. Discover how you can seize the moment to change higher education forever. Commencement, The Beginning of a New Era in Higher Education, now available on Amazon. For bulk orders, contact Kate, Joe, or Elvin